Hello, guys. There is, Johan. The thing is to make the host or me to be viewed in the main picture, then the sound has to come from me. So that's basically the reason why we have why we've muted you guys, so that we don't end up switching pictures all the time. So there. Jonathan, are you there?
I am now here.
There you are. Hello.
Yes. Is DJ here as well? Sorry, I have internet connectivity issues.
I am not sure. He was here a second ago, but oh, there he is.
My video though. Am I here?
Ian Cunningham writes, I love that DJ has been muted. So there we go.
Not muted anymore.
No. They can't contain his powerful voice. Girl, please. I'm loving
House of Fire should be named House of Wind Eaters. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Doesn't sound too good, does it? All right. I think we're about ready to start, guys. Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining us today or tonight. I'm currently in New Delhi and it's late here. And Jonathan, you are currently in Taiwan, and I think that is even later there. What time is it in your place?
It's 1:30 a.m. right now. The wind never sleeps. The wind never
only
rests.
Rocks back and forth in the fetal position due to exhaustion.
Oh, John, I'm gonna kill you.
Just a bit of friendly competition there, folks. So, all right, should we go ahead with our announcements?
Yeah, we have a big announcement actually. So we're gonna give out this award to someone who's been number one, making us laugh. G Money, Garrett, you get the House Spirit Award. So if you guys haven't checked out what he's been putting out, his intro, what he's been putting on Instagram, doing some nunchucks, I think, beating up a Chewbacca mask. You got to watch that. So yeah, House Spirit Award is going to go to you. You're actually going to get a free consultation with Professor John.
Yep. So yeah, I'm going to get in touch with you, Mr. G Money, sir, and we'll find a time and day to to do the consultation.
And what house is he in again? What house is he in again? What house? What house? House of Wind. That's what house is.
House of Flatulence, Jonathan.
House of Wind gets the W.
Yeah.
And John, we also have in his prize, you have to be shirtless during the consultation.
That I would do that anyways. It's just how I work. Oh yeah, by the way, DJ, I had an interesting experience today. I met two members of your house here in New Delhi. I did a workshop over here. And yeah.
Did you live?
Excuse me?
You lived to tell about it, so it must have been a good experience.
Well, you should have seen the other guys. But yeah. How come your video is not on, DJ? Your camera is off.
Because, hey, the man's always trying to keep me down. House water, house wind.
Let's see. Okay. There we go.
Cool.
Okay.
You guys have a little bit about.
Yeah.
Besides that, really, we have 70-something people in here live right now, which is great. So the structure for this lecture Professor John will be presenting. DJ and I will be acting as facilitators. And if you have any questions, please type them in the chat, and we will get to them roughly towards the end of the lecture, and answer them there. So if any questions come to your mind, just go ahead, shoot them off into the chat, and take some notes, obviously, and we'll get to those at the end. Back to you, John.
And another thing is that just to kind of give you guys into some insight into the format of these webinars in the long term, is that in this lecture we will be presenting a topic, and the next week, after you've gotten to try out some of the assignments and the homework that we give you, there will be a Q&A, so that we will answer those questions that we see as being beneficial for you to get answers to this chat. But we will save some of the questions that we believe that you will benefit more from in week 2. And we'll also do a live Q&A in week 2. And we'll give you new variations of the different assignments that we've given to you this week. And in week 3, we're doing another Q&A. But in this Q&A, you will not be answering us questions. We will be questioning you. So we're going to give you guys questions, and we want to get as much answers from you as possible. We want this to not only be a one-way communication, which isn't really right of me to say now that I've muted you all, but but that's just my Asian genes. I can't help the fact that I'm half Chinese, and I will try to control everything you see and hear and say. Censorship, yay. But yeah, we really want you guys to be a part of this process where we get experiences, and then we share those experiences, and based on the experiences, then we learn how to ask more important or more prudent questions. So yeah, that's basically the layout, at least for the next 3 weeks. And yes, I guess that's it. Another thing, one more thing. It's been wonderful seeing how this community has developed. Even though so far it's mainly just online, it's so cool to see how you guys are interacting and the kind of mood and energy that is in the group. It is what we always wanted, which was an inclusive community, not an exclusive culture. So thank you guys so much, and I hope that you guys continue. We want to make sure that you guys are interacting with each other and communicating, and if there is anything that we can do to make that easier for you guys, you need to tell us, because we are not that smart.
And now that we're in an inclusive, group together, rule number 1 of the project: you don't talk about the project. All right. No one else is allowed in. Handshake.
But excluding what DJ just said, for the upcoming assignments, please use the hashtag the project 1A. That way you can see your fellow house members' progress, other house members' progress, and so that we can see it as well. That way you're not using saturated hashtags. So feel free to post anything on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or not. You don't really have to, but we will keep our eyes out on every single one of you. So please use those as best as you can.
Big Brother is watching. Okay.
Excuse me. So hashtag the project 1A for this challenge. And then we're going to include with that hashtag of house, either wind, water, or fire. So that way we could see your challenge for the week, and we could also see what group you're in. So those two are going to be important.
Yeah. That will allow us to also, gather up all the videos, and hopefully we can make create a highlight reel after a month or after a week or something like that. So that way you guys get to see what the other people are doing without only having to search for it yourself. All right.
All right, John, what is our topic? I'm excited.
Me too. This is the first time I've done live webinar or teaching online, and it feels a bit weird to talk to a computer screen, but yeah, let's do it. So this week's topic is task-oriented training. And I'll explain to you what that is. But before I do that, I want to tell you a little story about the sea squirt. DJ, Jonathan, have you heard about the sea squirt?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah?
That's the one stuck to a rock and can't move until it forms a central nervous system. Kinda. The sea squirt is an incredibly fascinating creature. It is abundant. There are plenty of sea squirts in the sea. And when they're born with a nervous system. And in the initial stage of their life, they spend their time swimming around. They make tiny contractions along their body so that they can transport their body through their immediate environment. And the reason they do that is because they are looking for a rock. Not just any rock, but the perfect rock. And for a sea squirt, what the perfect rock essentially is a rock where there will be a lot of nutrients flowing past. So the sea squirt makes all these tiny contractions, makes its way, and finds, hopefully, the perfect rock. And as soon as it finds the perfect rock, it will basically embed its body onto that rock, because it doesn't need to move anymore. It has found the perfect spot for it to get all the calories that it needs. And one would think that it would stop there, but it does something very fascinating after it has fastened its body onto this rock, and that is to eat its own nervous system. It basically eats its own central nervous system. Can you imagine why, DJ? It no longer needs to navigate its environment.
Pow! Yes, exactly.
5 points to 5.
Yeah, that's the really fascinating thing about a central nervous system. The only logical reason why we have a brain is because we are supposed to navigate through our immediate environment. We need to be able to manipulate objects. We need to be able to transport our body from point A to point B. We are meant to solve tasks in our immediate environment so that we can get calories, perhaps save ourselves from certain death, or perhaps even save calories.
Or make babies.
You are my rock, John. Well, you don't necessarily need a brain for that, DJ. That's why there are too many babies. But the fascinating thing, if we compare the C-squirt to ourselves, I know that it's not very enjoyable to compare yourself to something called a C-squirt, but it's but it's smart to do it anyways. If we compare ourselves to the C-squirt and we think about our current environment is basically designed for us to interact with it with as little effort as possible. And the same thing has happened to the modern day gym. The modern day gym is all about creating a perfect environment, so there are as few obstacles for you to navigate through or over or under or manipulate. It's basically the perfect setting. And the reason why we have this perfect setting is because we want to give people an opportunity to work towards the perfect result, whatever that may be. I've worked at a gym for a lot of years, and I worked as a personal trainer at a gym as well for a lot of years. And I got really, really sick and tired of not the gym itself, but so much of the conventional wisdom in the gym. And a piece of conventional wisdom in the gym was that the only way that you could build lower body strength was by lifting something really heavy. So you had to do your squats, you had to do your Bulgarian split squats, your deadlifts, your Romanian deadlifts, your reverse lunges, and yada, yada, yada. Yeah, I was kind of annoyed that so many people were talking about this. So I decided to, I gave myself a big task. I told myself that I wanted to try to come up with as many different ways of training my lower body without being or needing to use exercises like the squat and the deadlift, and without using any type of external load. So that was kind of the goal I set for myself. Now I knew that if I went into the gym, it would be incredibly difficult for me not to do squats and deadlifts, because I really enjoy squats and deadlifts. And Scott Mifsud, he just commented, "Wheels without steel." And that is basically, that's a video on YouTube that you can search for, "Wheels Without Steel." And it's a video or a montage I created that basically is a highlight of this project that I did. And the project basically, what I did is I told myself that I was not allowed to go into a gym for approximately, I think it was around 8 to 10 months. I could go into a gym to work, but not to work out. And the reason I did that was because I knew that if I went into that environment, then it would be very difficult for me not to do squats and deadlifts, because I enjoy doing them. And if I wanted to figure out as many ways of doing a lower body exercise or lower body exercises, then I needed to be in a condition, an environment that basically encouraged me to do that. I needed help from my environment. I could not only make the decision myself of coming up with a shitload of exercises, I needed my conditions to encourage me. Not only my internal, but also the external conditions. And that's when I came up with a lot of different lower body exercises. Maybe some of you have seen like the Helix, or the Hiley, or the Touchdown. And what I want to do today is basically show you guys how I ended up coming up with these different exercises. And the way I did that was by giving myself a task. Not an exercise, but a task. And there's a pretty big difference between the two. In an exercise, we are working towards a specific result. So we're trying to perfect a movement. We're trying to perform well in a movement to get a result in the long term. We are designing ourselves towards a result, a specific result. The difference between an exercise and a task is that in a task, you do not do the movement to get a long-term result. That is not your priority. The priority when you perform or try to solve you perform a task, you try to solve a puzzle, is that you do not move to get a specific result because of an adaptation. You move because you need to move a particular way to solve the task. There are many people who've done different tasks before. A lot of you are probably familiar with DJ's paper pickup challenge, which is an epic task. And yeah, maybe you've done a couple of other ones as well. And these are all great. They're awesome. The only thing about these challenges is that we try to perform one move. And with the tasks that I want to show you guys today, it's not about performing one move. It is to create an environment, it's to create a condition that forces you, or not forces you, it encourages you to move in as many different ways as possible. So,
Quick question.
Mm-hmm.
So these tasks in moving in a particular way, do you mean that the path is created for you, or you have to figure out the path that works best for you?
Basically, it's a combination of the two. You are going to interact with your environment in such a way that you have to move certain types of body parts. You have to get certain body parts maybe closer to an object or further away from an object, or manipulate an object. And you can do that with quite a lot of variation. And the variation is decided upon by, of course, what you want to do, but also what is possible for you to do. So I'm just going to show you guys a quick example of this. Now, what I've tried to do with these tasks that I'm giving you is that the tasks that we're going to work on this week are squats. And the primary thing we're thinking about when we're doing squats is that you're standing either on two or one leg, and you're getting your hip as low to the ground as possible. Now, what we're going to do is we're kind of going to try to kind of deconstruct the squat, so that we're going to focus on particular body parts that are involved in the squat and learn how to use these body parts in as many different ways as possible. Now, when we're moving these different body parts, we're not thinking about what is the functional way for these body parts to move. Functionality in this situation really doesn't matter. We're trying to make your body parts more practical. And there's a big difference between moving functionally and moving practically. So the first task that I'm going to show you guys is a squat. It's known as a barrier squat. And we're creating a type of condition that basically makes you move your ankle and your knee a lot. So here's the basic premise for this task. You are going to place 3 to 4 objects around your body. Now, in this video, I'm only going to use 3 objects, and I'm placing them in the direction of 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. So let's just watch the video first. This was after a 14-hour flight and 3 hours of sleep, so excuse everything about my being. Now, I'm going to stop right there. The premise here is that I'm trying to touch the objects with one foot. But when I do this, I am not allowed to move my torso forward. So my torso has to remain vertical as I'm doing this. Now, due to this simple rule, I can't bend a lot at the hip. I have to bend my ankle and my knee. And I have to figure out how I can move practically while reaching towards these different points of contact. So we're just going to watch it one more time. And what I want you to notice here is one of the basics in movement, which is that if your body is going in one direction, something needs to go in the opposite direction. We want to maintain the position of our center of mass over our base of support. If we don't, we fall. So I'm leaning forward with my leg, and I have to lean backwards with my torso. I'm leaning to my right, and I'm creating counterweight with my left arm. And I'm also pulling my right arm in a very masculine manner, I must say, to maintain balance. Now,
John, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So are we allowed to pivot the foot, lift the foot, or does it have to stay planted?
You're allowed to rotate it a bit, but you can rotate your foot so that it points either towards 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, or 1 o'clock, but not towards 9, 12, 3. That would, if you did that, then we would have the same movement in the knee in all three movements. And that's what's pretty fascinating if you look at the video here, is that once you're leaning out to the side, there's a certain position of the knee of the supporting leg there. To the other side, there's a totally different angle in the knee and in the ankle as well.
And Roop asks if we have to leave the heel on the ground.
I would encourage you to start with your heel on the ground. And what you're going to do as you're doing this task, let's see here, is that you're first just going to put the objects down on the floor and touch those objects. If you manage to touch those objects with your foot, then you're going to push them just a bit further away. And if you get to the point where you need to elevate your heel, then that is cool. That is fine. You're allowed to do everything that you want to do except leaning forward at the torso so that your torso becomes less than vertical. So we want you to end up here. So by doing that, we really get to focus on the movement in the ankle and the knee. And what's great about doing this is that you get, like, we always hear about kind of these, unfortunately, a bit simplistic explanations as to how joints move. Like, oh, I need to improve my squat by working on my dorsiflexion. There's nothing wrong about working on your dorsiflexion. It's a wonderful thing. But you can dorsiflex in a lot of different ways. And that's what's so cool for me about tasks, is that it's the amount of variation that you get. It's learning how to not perform a movement in one condition, but being able to modify your movements based on a situation. And truth be told, like if we are only able to do a squat in one way, then we probably won't squat that much, because different situations demand different types of squats. It demands different types of ankle in the knees and movement in the knees and movement in the ankles. And the more we're able to practically move with our ankles and our knees, the more we do the movement and the more we improve.
John, you said that there's a difference between functionality and practicality.
Yes.
So when I see you doing a task-related movement, to me, that seems very functional, because you're actually serving a function that you could see in real time, in the present moment. You're solving you're providing a solution and getting a job done. So what's your definition of functionality and practicality?
I mean, ultimately, it's a question of semantics, what we choose to define as practical or functional. But if we look at the vast majority of literature out there, or articles, or posts on Instagram, whenever people write about something that is functional, it often involves how a joint is supposed to move. And it's the functional movement is based on the assumption that we know how a joint should move. And I mean, there are certain guidelines as to how a joint should function. If it has a greater range of active, or greater active range of motion, then that can be a good thing, so that you can use it in various ways, and that you have a strong joint. But the difference between the functional movement and the practical movement is that in the practical movement, we don't really think about how much dorsiflexion am I getting in this movement. It's not as though we think about, oh, in this movement is really good for my quads. The cross-sectional area of my quads is going to increase tenfold if I do this. That's not what we're thinking about. We're not thinking about the result that you get from the movement. We're thinking about how you move to achieve a result. We're thinking about how you move to solve a task. We're thinking about how you move so that you can navigate in the immediate environment, as opposed to trying to do some sort of premonition to understand what you need of the functional stuff.
Right. So would you say exercise-based movements are mainly conceptual?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why exercises were made in the gym and not out of the gym. You can't, it's very difficult to find exercises in nature. It's very difficult to find exercises in kindergarten. And the reason for that is that the exercises are based on the premise that we have a very specific and very perfect condition. So like the floor is flat, you have AC, perhaps a mirror, so that you can actually analyze the cross-sectional area of your quads. And you have all these external loads, you have equipment, and so forth and so forth. And because of these really, really wonderful conditions, you can give yourself an internal task. So when you put a bar on your neck, I mean, you can do whatever you want to, really. The bar is not demanding anything from you except, please don't fall, please don't drop me. So you can, if you have a bar on your upper back, you can decide to just go for a walk with it. Maybe you can do a reverse lunge. Maybe you can do a squat. But the movement is decided upon by you and your idea, your concept of what kind of movement you need to create a specific result. And it's not a bad thing. I do a lot of exercises myself. I would say that the majority of the time I focus on exercises, but it does have a limitation. Have you seen, this is a stupid question. Have you seen Free Willy, DJ?
When I was a little kid, man, when I was mirth stage, yeah.
So 30 years ago, is that what you're saying?
I'm not an infant, y'all. I'm not an infant.
All right. Do you remember Willy's fin, his dorsal fin?
Yeah.
It had a curve on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not a straight fin, it was a curved fin. And why does that happen?
Because he only swam in one direction in the tank he was in.
Yes. So number one, he only swam in one direction. not the boy band, but direction. And he basically only did one thing. Now, it is very functional for a killer whale to swim, but if you only swim in one direction, you're going to adapt a very specific way. In his case, he got a curved dorsal fin. There's another thing also, or another theory, I guess you could say, as to why his fin was curved. And that was because of the amount of space that he had, his conditions. And we see this with, goldfish as well, or carps. If you put a carp in a small pond, it doesn't become a really big carp. If you put it in a bigger pond, it gets bigger. And I think that's it's a beautiful metaphor as to how we work as well, which is that we adapt to the conditions that we create for ourselves. And if the conditions that we create for ourselves is based on the assumption that we should move because we know what results we need, because we know what results we want, and because we know exactly how we should move in a functional manner, then all of a sudden, these conditions can become somewhat confining. And because conditions aren't only external. Unfortunately, we have evolved to the stage that our internal conditions can adapt us just as much as our external conditions. And when we're doing an exercise, we create a very specific internal condition for ourselves. And that is, you can do an exercise in one out of two ways. Either you do it right, or you do it wrong. When we're doing tasks, we are not focusing on right, and we're not focusing on wrong. We're focusing on, does it feel better, or does it feel worse? There's a spectrum that you're allowed to explore when you're exploring or trying to solve a task. Yes, you're trying to do something that allows you to maybe interact with your environment in a specific way, but you're not trying to do something specific. You're not doing it right or wrong. You're doing it in a way that feels maybe better, more efficient, more comfortable. Maybe it looks cooler, that's fine as well. Or perhaps you're closer to the opposite, where it feels uncomfortable, it feels weird. So, you've now seen exercise or assignment number 1. And I'm going to give you some info as to how many times you can do it and how many days a week. But first, I want to show you the rest of the exercises. So, we just did an exercise where you moved as much through your ankle and your knee as possible. And you did that by reaching with your foot in 3 different directions. Now we're going to allow the ankles and the knees to rest a bit, and we're going to focus a bit more instead on the hips and the spine. So this is the exercise, drop it like it's not. In this exercise, the goal is to place the objects as far away from you as possible, again in 3 different directions, 3 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. And I'm going to place these objects with the same hand. Now, the only rule here is that your hip is not allowed to be at the same level or lower than your knee. So again, I'm reaching in one direction, not the boy band, and I have to compensate by reaching with my leg in the opposite way. And this exercise is basically a study in counterweight. So again, we're moving the knee, we're moving the ankle, but now we're focusing a lot more on the movement of the spine. And there.
What?
Okay, so I just want to show you guys one thing, one moment that I like in this video, and it is where I make I guess you can call it a mistake. It's not really a mistake. I just do something that is not beneficial to my movement. So right, let's see. Where was it? I think it's here. Oh, come on, John. Let's see. I can't find it.
I saw it.
Did you see it?
It was in the middle.
It was in the middle?
The front one. Yeah.
I can't remember. Or there, it's probably here. That tiny movement there. So just from here, and then I lost my balance. Doesn't look like much. I'm not falling on my ass, but I lost my balance for just a second. And that is something that I also really, really like about performing these tasks, which is that you're allowed to make more mistakes, and that you will make more mistakes because you're dealing with a lot more information than in a regular exercise. There are so many different angles and so much going on that due to the increased amount of variables, the degree of mistakes that you make is bigger.
Question.
Yes.
For these particular set of tasks, what would you define as a mistake? Would it be, you said losing balance. Does that mean losing control, or does that mean not moving in the way that you intended to move?
Both. It's, if we're going to look at what good movement is, oh man, Ido is going to kill me for saying this. Good movement. You like that, Ian?
Hashtag, okay. I don't portal.
I don't portal. Okay, so about good movement, if we're going to look at what good movement is, just in general, good movement is about, first and foremost, about being energy efficient. So learning to move in a more practical manner so that you don't have to push a lot, don't have to pull a lot, but maybe you combine both pushing and pulling. Maybe you understand how you need to create counterweight once you go in a direction and all of this stuff. If you're able to move with more efficiency, then I would say that is good movement. That is why, you know, when you say Usain Bolt run across the finish line, he doesn't look like he's taxed at all. It looks like it was literally a breeze, hashtag house wind, for him to pass that finish line. Why? Because he knows how to conserve his energy. And that is the common denominator between all the graceful movement arts, is that it just looks annoyingly easy when they do it. So that would be number one. Number two is about minimizing the amount of negative consequences in a movement. So what is a negative consequence in a movement? Well, it depends on the intention. But if there is a point in the movement where we increase the risk of trauma, like losing our balance, then that is something that becomes really apparent to us. Like for us, every single human being understands what a limp is. It's very easy for us to identify what a limp is. And it's, if any one of you watches, you know, So You Think You Can Dance or Dancing with the Stars and all these shows, it's super easy for you as well to see when a movement is good or when it's bad. It's because we are designed to look for negative consequences in a movement, because the more negative consequences that you produce in a movement, the easier you are to, you know, eat. You're an easy prey. But in this particular case, why I call this a mistake was basically because I lost control for just a little bit.
So. I have a question, John.
Yes, sir.
So I noticed that in the first one, we imposed a restriction or a rule onto the challenge. But that also opened up options in the ankles and knees a little more. So can you talk about the benefits of restrictions in a movement?
Yes. I think I mentioned this in your podcast, Jonathan, about limitations or restrictions. You remember?
Yes. Yeah, I do remember this.
Like our dear mutual friend, Oscar Wilde, said, the absence of limitations is the nemesis of art or creativeness. If we don't impose any type of restrictions upon ourselves, then we will end up doing what we find the easiest thing to do. That's, why in a gym, it's perfectly understandable that these people want to do, leg curls or a chest press or, cable flies. It's the path of least or less resistance for them in that situation. And why? Because they don't have any restrictions. But the cool thing is as soon as we give ourselves any kind of restriction, which is what our environment does in a natural environment, then we would naturally have to come up with more ways of solving the task. So when I'm doing the first one and I'm not allowed to lean forward with my upper body and I have to position my feet in all these different angles, I could have made it super easy. I could have gone the path of least resistance by bending my hip. But in this case, I want to explore my movement capacity in my ankles and my knees. So that simply by not allowing myself to lean forward at the torso, due to less contribution of the hip, the knees and the ankles will have to move more, but it will also have to move in more ways, which is one of the coolest things about these tasks. And because we're moving in more ways, we often end up making more of these mistakes. But here's the thing about mistakes. We live in a performance culture, right? We're all meant to perform somehow. We're all meant to do cool stuff and seem flawless. And especially in the world of training, like if you do a quarter squat or a partial squat, you will hear it, right? And a lot of us, we design our program in such a way that we make the least amount of mistakes that we can make in a training session. We all want to feel that amount of mastery of being able to do a technique the perfect way. Because if we don't do the technique in the perfect way, however could the movement be beneficial to us? And a lot of people assume that if they create a program and they move with a technique that is perfect, then the result will be perfect. And this, unfortunately, is where we start to confuse performance with learning. And there's a big difference. Performance is how well you are able to move in a single bout of movement or exercise or workout. So if you're able to move well in a workout or a competition or whatever, then that is your performance. Learning is how much knowledge that you retain from one session until the next one. And this is where mistakes are important. And this is where moving in more ways is also important. To give you an example, if we were to split this, if we were to divide everyone involved in this project into two groups, and to the one group we said, we're going to shoot basketball. And to group number one, they are allowed to shoot from the 3-point line, and only from the 3-point line. Group number two, they have to shoot from 3 different distances. As an example, 2 meters, 4 meters, and 6 meters. And not only that, they also have to shoot in a random sequence. So it's not 2, 4, 6, 2, 4, 6. It's 4, 4, 2, 4, 4, 6, 4, 6, 6, 4, 4, 4, 2. a random sequence. Now, the performance of group A, the ones who are only shooting from the 3-point line, their performance will be better. Their accuracy, the percentage of their accuracy, will be better than group number B. And that goes without saying because they're only shooting from one distance. So they're able to refine the movement pattern. And so their performance increases in that bout of practice. Group number B, their accuracy is not as good. I mean, they have to relate to 3 different distances, and not only that, they have to do so by not knowing exactly which distance they're going to shoot from the next shot and the next shot. The interesting thing is that in the second session, when they do a retest of the percentages of accuracy in the respective groups, and this was something that they did in the study, group number A, even though their accuracy percentage-wise was better than group number B, they did not retain as much as of that skill to the next session. Group number B, even though their accuracy compared to group number A was not as good, were able to retain more of the accuracy. And that is the massive difference between performing well, only doing things perfect, and learning well. And that's also a massive bonus to performing or trying to solve these movement puzzles, is that you're going to get more opportunities to fail, and you are going to get more opportunities to move in more ways. Moving in more ways, your body does not know what dorsiflexion is. It doesn't know what a quad is. It doesn't know what your gastrocnemius or your perineum is. It has no idea. The only thing the body knows is the data that it has to deal with. It's trying to create something. It's trying to solve a task, and it has to filter through a massive amount of noise data in the external environment and in the internal environment. Now, the external environment, that could be what kind of surface are you on, where are you reaching with your leg, what type of light is there, what's the temperature like, who's around me, and that kind of stuff. The internal environment could be, how much did you sleep last night? In my case, 3 hours. What did you eat today? Are you tired? How's your mood? What are you thinking about? That's the internal conditions. Now, in an exercise setting, the goal and the reason why exercises are so popular and purely working with specific exercises with a perfect technique is because it allows you to deal with the least amount of data. That's why it's so appealing to us. That's why it's easy for us to perfect our technique and feel like we're learning well, when really we are only performing well, or primarily performing well. Of course, you're learning as well. Whereas when we're performing tasks, we get more novel input. And when the body gets more novel input, it basically gets more reference points. It gets more experience. And by giving it more experience, it knows how to deal with challenges in the future in a better way. So in your brain, there is nothing, like in your frontal lobe, there's not a tiny drawer here that says squat, and then you can just pick out the perfect technique and then squat perfectly. That's not unfortunately not the way it works. The way it works is that you are giving your body a task, either if it's only conceptual or if it's based on the conditions. And then what your body does, it looks at all the experiences that you've had throughout your entire life, and it tries to solve the task in the most efficient way possible based on your experiences. So if your experience with a squat is feet shoulder width apart, externally rotated 20 to 35 degrees, ass to grass, no lumbar flexion, no posterior tilt of the pelvis. If that is the amount of experience that your body has when it comes to movement, then it will be more difficult for it to solve the task that you give it later. So
Hold on, John.
Yes.
I got to cut in, man. Sorry. Are you trying to tell me that there's not a person in your head who runs the squat program and loads that file? Are you saying our brains aren't computers?
A very fun, like, this is about, if we're going to go, oh, we're going into murky waters here. I'm sorry. But this is just such a fascinating concept. The way we think about our bodies is based on metaphors. So for a lot of people, when they think about their body, they think about it as a machine, and they think about the brain often as a data. And not too long ago, the EU, they invested, I think it was 1.6 or 1.2 $1 billion into something known as the Big Data Project. And the Big Data Project was a researcher whose theory was that he could simulate the human brain on a computer because, you know, the brain is a computer. And in theory, it was a good idea. But we have to remember that his theory was based on a metaphor. His theory was based on a belief, and that belief was that the brain is like a computer, that it only processes zeros and ones. 2 years later, the project was abandoned. And they basically, all the headlines for this project said, a brain wreck. It was impossible for this researcher to simulate a human brain on a computer because this hair doesn't only process data, it processes experiences and senses, and they are way more complicated than zeros and ones. Let's move on to the next task. So here is...
Before you move on to the next task, Roop asks a really good question in the group. He asks, so you said in the video you made a mistake. Now we are talking about learning coming from mistakes. So is our task focused around good, efficient movement or letting ourselves make mistakes to learn?
I would say that you don't have to look for mistakes, and you don't have to try to create something. You're simply going to move in a way that gives you more experiences. The more experience you get, the more plausible it is that you will be more efficient in your movement afterwards, and that you will be able to minimize these negative consequences of losing your balance or using too much energy or perhaps falling on your face. So focus on just being receptive to what's happening, not trying to create something specific, but being receptive to what's happening based on how you're moving, so that you can take in all that information and all that wonderful data, so that you can allow it to become a part of your body's experience.
Second question.
And also, John, I'm sorry, real quick. If there is a certain range or certain spot where someone is making a lot of mistakes and having a lot of difficulties, would you say that's probably the most valuable place to spend time gathering data and exploring?
Yes, I would say so. This is where we have to kind of address the importance of knowing oneself. So if you go into a direction or a movement where you find a lot of what you perceive as flaws or mistakes, then of course you can focus on that. But if you focus on it to such an extent that it becomes a more negative experience than a positive one, then perhaps you should allow yourself to play around a bit more with the other variations. The way we move is based on associations. So if you've had a negative experience with a range of motion over and over and over and over again, and you don't allow yourself to have a pleasurable experience with another movement or another direction, then you're kind of setting setting yourself up for failure. The good thing about these tasks is that they will reveal weaknesses, if we can call them that. They will reveal certain movements that are more challenging for you to perform. And that's when we can start talking about exercises. Maybe there is a specific movement that you find you seem to struggle with a lot, and instead of putting that in a task, you can create a specific exercise that helps you deal with that. So I'm going to show you another video now, where basically this movement, it showed me that it was possible to do the touchdown. So just give me a moment. Let's see. Yes. This task is known as ew. The reason why it's called ew is because you're trying to daintily push something as far away from you as possible. So what you're going to do here is that you're going to place a couple of different objects around your body. You can position, in this case I used 3. You can use 4 or 5, but I would suggest that you start with 3. And the goal now is to use one foot as a base of support. That foot is allowed to rotate, but not so much that you end up in pointing it towards 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock. It's allowed to rotate, but not all the way around. And the goal here is to take your foot, your leg, and push the object as far away from you as possible. Now here's the restriction. The restriction is that you have to be able to pull yourself back without using momentum. So let's see what happens when John decides to punish himself physically. So when I tried this movement here.
What the fuck?
This was when I understood that the touchdown was possible. If you guys haven't seen the touchdown, then I don't know if you can Google touchdown, but you can look at my Instagram profile and there's a couple of examples of it there. This was when I understood that how far down I could reach with my shoulder simply by bringing my chest closer towards my base of support. Now, this is cool, but the cooler thing is to be able to get back. If we're going to look at mobility not as something functional, but as something practical, the mobility is about being able to get into and out of a position. If we're just going to look at it practically. And then we have variation number 2.
I fucking hate you, John.
I hate you too. And now variation number 3. And these are just arbitrary directions that I'm pushing towards. And here comes the pretty face. Yay! Okay. So that is basically the third task. Taking an object, pushing it as far away from you as possible while still being able to pull yourself back. Now this is a lesson in weight placement. If I'm going to use one leg, if you look at my left leg now, and if I'm going to use this as a base of support and efficiently being able to pull my body with that base of support, there needs to be weight on top of it. A body part that is not weighted is something that we can push with, but we can't pull with it as easily. So here, if you look at, I'm using my left leg as a base of support, and I'm using my right arm as a counterweight, and my left arm as a counterweight, and my right arm as something that allows me to get more weight on top of that foot. If that foot was not weighted, I would not be able to pull myself back. So what you use in the second exercise to create counterbalance Here, yes, you're also creating counterbalance, but more so you're positioning weight on top of your base of support so that you can pull yourself back. Okay. Ta-da! So those are your 3 tasks for the week. So number 1 is the barrier squat. Number 2 is the drop it like it's not. And number 3 is you. And I'm going to upload these videos individually up to the Facebook group. And I'll write some directions or instructions for the different tasks. But I would also like to tell you a bit about how you should practice them. So first and foremost, the most important thing when you do these tasks is to respect your body, but don't trust it in this case. You want to respect how you feel when you do something completely new. If you feel like it's difficult or that there's an uncomfortable sensation somewhere, you need to respect that. But you shouldn't just blatantly trust it because you've never done it before. And the way the body works as any other biological organism is that it's there to protect you. It's there to save you so that you can make you save calories, get calories, and make a baby. And to be able to do that, you need to survive. So it's always going to try to protect you. And if you do something new, something that is foreign to the body, that is viewed as something dangerous. So it will be, it'll be easier to feel these uncomfortable, weird sensations once you start. And you should respect it, but don't trust it. Allow yourself to give yourself more experiences when you try it. The second thing is that you need to be receptive when you're doing this. You don't have to think about exactly how you're rotating your hip or how you're tilting your pelvis or how you're rotating through the spine or doing an elevation or whatever. That is not something that you need to focus on. What you need to focus on is simply being receptive to everything that's happening so that you get to experience, oh, that's how it feels to have weight on the inside of my foot. Or, oh, that's how it feels when I tilt my hips out to the side to be able to do this movement. So that's how it feels is a very good question for yourself, for you to ask once you're doing this, and not necessarily trying to come up with you don't have to come up with very specific answers or trying to create very specific techniques while you're doing it. So we can do this, we can practice these tasks in 2 different ways. Very easily, you can do task number 1 on day 1, task number 2 on day 2, and task number 3 on day 3, and then repeat. If you don't have a lot of experience doing more challenging or heavier lower body exercises, then that would be an appropriate frequency for you to work on. And if you're going to work on it 1 task per day, I would just, instead of saying to yourself, I'm going to do 4 sets of 7.5 repetitions at 77.5% of my 1 rep max, instead of saying that, give yourself 15 minutes. Tops. Give yourself a maximum amount of time, not a minimum amount of repetitions and sets, but maximum amount of time, and just play with it. Take the rest that you need, take the break that you need, do as many repetitions you want to in any given direction. Just set aside 15 minutes just to play with it. If you are more accustomed to lower body work, then we can do 2 tasks a day. So day 1, you would do tasks 1 and 2. Day 2, you would do tasks 2 and 3. Day 3, you would do tasks 3 and 1. And day 4, you would do tasks 1 and 2. So simply doing 2 tasks a day. And then for the amount of work you should do, I would, and this is such a random number, just so you know, guys, because I have no idea exactly how much you should do. If anyone says they do, slap them in the face. They're lying. I would say maybe around 20 minutes. 20 minutes to focus on both tasks. And I would advise you to alternate so that we can be like this basketball team that shot in a randomized sequence from several distances so that you can get more input, more novel input.
2 questions.
Yes, sir.
One is, would you encourage us to, as we're sharing this content both inside the Facebook group and on social media, would you encourage us to post, or more specifically post our mistakes that we make as well, or just the final result of what we have done after those 15-20 minutes have passed? What would you encourage us to do?
That, my good sir, is what is known as a rhetorical question. You know what to do, guys. I don't have to tell you this. Give yourself an opportunity to just give a screenshot of the most realistic part of your practice. The most human and realistic part of your practice. Just give us a screenshot. That's all we need. It's of course cool to only show the final product. And I love seeing final products because then I can, imagine the work that's behind that product. But, in our case, for our houses of wind and fire and water, I think that it would be cooler if we actually if we just recorded it, looked at it, and then just identified the greatest learning experience, perhaps. Not the biggest mistake. You don't need to post videos of yourself falling on your ass, but just a learning experience. And the learning experience can happen when you make a mistake. It can happen when you do something successfully. I don't really care. I care about I don't care about if you fail or you succeed. I want to see how you learn. And I think that more people deserve to observe how other people learn. Are there any other
question, Mirth?
Yes. The other question I had to ask was, just in regards to posting this. So for the first week, before next week's live Q&A, where we ask questions, what questions would you encourage us to think about as we're going through this next week with this set of tasks?
If you find yourself in a situation where you are unmotivated because something is uncomfortable, or you feel like you're not progressing, or you feel like you don't know what to do, then I would suggest that you ask those questions specifically in week 2. That is my answer, sir.
That's it. Thank you. DJ?
Yeah, can you explain, so right here we're exploring tasks, and we talked a lot about the benefits. Can you talk about the limitations of a task-based approach?
Sure. The limitations of a task-based approach is basically that it can, well, now I'm ending up answering the question that I recommended that you ask next week, but here goes anyway. The limitations of it is motivation. Number one, we become demotivated because if you do this, and especially if you do it with friends or with your family, I can guarantee you that you will have a lot of fun. And that is a limitation. Fun is not good. And the reason for that is because we, in our culture, in our gym culture, we often associate fun with just fun. To get a result, it needs to be bloody, sweaty. There should be gall pouring out of your ears. There needs to be some kind of atmosphere of intensity and being able to resist against all the challenges that you're giving yourself. That is the way that you get results. If you're having fun, well, then you're just having fun. But it is actually a challenge because, like, when I do these tasks, it is challenging, but for me, it's super interesting. It's kind of like watching Animal Planet or National Geographic. You learn so much when you do it. And for a lot of people, it can be difficult to kind of reconcile with the fact that when it is fun, that it actually is effective. And this is something that happens, something really wonderful that happens once we start to focus on solving a task as opposed to performing a movement for the sake of a result. When we're doing a movement for the sake of a result, we don't get the immediate feeling of, oh, I've learned something, or, oh, I progressed. We only have the feeling that if I punish my body, if it's super tired, then in 48 hours or 24 hours, there will be a positive adaptation. That is our motivation. And it's a strong motivation because it's a strong association. But when it comes to performing these tasks, you are progressing then and there. In the moment, there is progression. You're not doing a movement or replicating a technique to create a result. The movement is the result. And that's why you need to be receptive. And that's why you need to pay attention. Because every time you do it, there will be a slight improvement. Or there should be. Not necessarily in how it looks, but maybe in how it feels. And maybe what you've learned from that movement. So we kind of need to shift our attitude or change our perspective as to what we perceive as an increased amount of competency. That competency, it won't necessarily come in 48 hours because you crushed your glutes. But perhaps it comes because you gave yourself an experience and you learned from it. The cool thing is that when you're doing these exercises, I can guarantee you that you'll probably do more than what you initially thought you would do. Once we put people in a task-oriented situation as opposed to a result-oriented situation, something that automatically happens is that we are able to exert more force than we thought. And we often end up doing more repetitions than we thought we would do. Why? Because we're not counting repetitions. With exercises, we count repetitions because we see our progression being determined by a minimum amount of work. When we're doing tasks, it's not about a minimum amount of work. It's about the maximum potential of learning and experiences. And because of this shift in perception, we often end up doing more repetitions. It's really interesting when you look at studies where people are allowed to solve tasks. So instead of saying to them, you are going to do a squat, you tell them you're going to stand on 2 feet and you're going to get your hips really close to the floor and then get back up. When they get the task as opposed to the exercise, they often end up doing more work and they often end up feeling less fatigued. Because when they're solving the task, the goal is not to create a lot of fatigue. It is to solve the task.
Okay, one more question, John. So this is a theoretical. You have to give me an answer, black or white.
Okay.
So as far as efficiency and performance, okay, would you say a base of these kind of artificial exercises that we've isolated and picked out, a strong base of these archetypal squat position, hinging movements, do you think going from a strong base and then exploring outward to these more organic exploratory movements would put you ahead of someone who started with these more exploratory movements and then moved into isolating the most efficient ways, which we would call exercises? Which path do you think is a better foundation? If you had a kid and you were gonna make them into a beast.
If I was a kid?
If you had a kid to train, what approach would you take with him?
I do. He's called Jonathan.
I fucking hate my life.
Child. I would say that creating a base based on tasks would be more efficient, simply because the tasks, basically, they allow you to, you're a more experienced mover. You're a more experienced human. And ultimately, the resources that you create from a young age, they do not matter if you as an individual, as a human being, haven't learned how to apply them. And it's much better to learn how to apply resources before you try to get them. It's kind of like everyone wants to earn a lot of money. Everyone wants a large source of income. But as you probably know, a lot of people who've gotten a sudden increase of income, they've ended up broke. Why? Because their budget sucks. And that's the difference between having a lot of one resource and learning how to apply the resource. And the same thing applies to movement as well. Doing squats is wonderful. A deadlift is a kick-ass exercise, and I love push-ups and pull-ups and all of these exercises. And I would recommend that everyone do them. However, if the increased amount of resources goes at the expense of how you apply the resources, you don't listen to your experience, or you deny yourself experience, then I would say that you are making things more complicated for yourself. And that you may indeed end up getting hurt by the resources that you were trying to accrue.
I think the Russians would agree.
Russians never agree. I'm sorry, Alexander Dudov. He's, I think, our Russian guy. He's a 101 meter free diver, so I shouldn't say that, because he can probably choke me out. All right.
Mirth, do we have any more questions from the group?
Yes, yeah, I'm going to go through the questions right now. So
I love that people are having a discussion about stretchy jeans. This is like the #1 question I get on Instagram.
Yeah, so, okay. Very technical question. Are you using, for these tasks, are you only, for task 1 and 2, are you only using one hand to place and touch the object, or can you use both as a later progression?
You can also use both, yes. When you use both, there will be, you will have to create more counterbalance with your lower extremity, and you will probably have to rotate more through your spine. And it will be more difficult to reach further out simply because you're not allowed to rotate, and rotation automatically allows you to reach a bit further with one arm. So it's a great restriction. I haven't tried that yet, so that's a great idea. Thanks, whoever said that.
I should have said that. I'm just going through right now.
Child,
I should have said that.
child, don't have opinions, child. We've talked about this.
So WPT asks, is it part of the task to place the objects with the same place you will be squatting from? This is specifically for task 1.
For task 1, I think it's a great starting point. So I would encourage you to at least try it and see if you're able to touch the different points of contact by first placing it from the squat. So yeah, it's not something that you have to do, but I would recommend that you at least try it out.
Howie asks, with practical, going back to the topic of functional versus practical, or in addition, and practical, would practical also be classified as more pedestrian movements, aka movements that an average person would do in everyday life? Does that include that, or is that classified as practical, or?
Well, I guess to an extent, like, because a bicep curl is probably one of the most practical movements that we do. It's something that we do every day, and it can be very challenging in a lot of different situations for a lot of different people. But so whether or not doing a touchdown something slidey out movement is relevant for a pedestrian, I don't know. I don't know about their lives and which kind of crazy situations they end up in as a pedestrian. But what is the thing about these tasks, and why we're trying to create restricting conditions, is because our conditions in our modern day lives are so non-restricting. We are the most mobile, non-restricted people on earth, or in our time, in this day and age. And that's why for so many of us, talking about what is practical and what is functional it's kind of not relevant anymore, unfortunately, because so many people aren't dependent on that. They don't go into restricting conditions or create restricting contexts. They don't need to do a 40-kilogram bicep curl because their grocery bags aren't heavier than 5 kilograms, as an example. The thing that is good about these tasks, and what I would say is practical when it comes to mentality, is when we're doing an exercise and we're trying to get a benefit from an exercise, we have to search for the reason as to why it was good for us to do that exercise. We always try to justify the exercise after we've done it. So like, I do the squat because it's so good for my bone density. It's a great exercise to increase the bone density of my femur. So if I fall, then I won't break my leg. And also this seated row is great for the rhomboids. And I feel training my rhomboids, it allows me to be more conscious of my scapula. Then I feel like I have a better posture. And if I have a better posture, then I feel better and things are awesome. We justify them by going through a long line of, going through a long linear narrative. When you're doing tasks, and what is practical about tasks when you think about mentality, is that you don't have to guess as to whether or not your bone density has increased, or if the cross-sectional area of your bicep is bigger, or if you're able to produce more torque over your elbow joint. You don't think about that, because you're getting confirmation from the immediate situation. And I would say that that is probably the most practical thing that you can give to another person. Instead of telling an older person, hey, we need to do squats so that you can get up from the floor easier, then we teach them how to get up and down from the floor. That is relevant to them, not the squat. The squat is a great tool. It can give us certain types of resources. It can increase your bone density. But by giving something practical to them, we don't have to justify the exercise by saying this is good for bone density, and that if your bone density is increased, then if you fall, then you won't break your legs. What we do with the tasks is that we teach them not to fall. There's a big difference there. It's about not having to rely on the theory of, now this is stronger, now this body part is better. It's about relating to reality. And that for me is the most beneficial, practical part about it, is that you start to trust and understand yourself in relation to reality and not in relation to a theory that you heard from somebody else, which is do this exercise and you will be a kick-ass human being.
Last question before we end, because we don't want to go on too long. Everyone does have lives to go on to. Melissa asks, are we posting daily videos of our progress or just posting once for this particular project, or both?
Personally, I would love it if you all managed to post one video of each assignment. That would be really cool. But I mean, we don't want to give you guys guidelines as to how much you should post. That is totally up to you. If you post something, it's because you want to, and it's because you want to share what you found out, share about your experiences. So that is up to you. But personally, I would love if you posted one of each. Mirth, I think you're talking, but you are also muted. I think you muted yourself, Mirth.
I did. I thought I was unmuted. Some people noticed that your floors were very slippery or very clean. If people don't have that type of flooring, can they use sliders, or what type of objects should they be looking to use? Any balls, anything like that?
Sliders work really well. If you don't have a flooring that allows you to slide in any way, so if you can't use sliders and you can't slide with your socks, then you can use, especially for the exercise, the third assignment, not an exercise, sorry. The third task, you can use a suspension trainer of some sort. And just allow yourself to slide your leg as far out as possible and then being able to pull yourself back in. So something like a TRX or rings will work as well. What I found when I've been working at gyms that that have rubber mats, it's pretty easy to find cardboard, and cardboard makes it a lot easier to slide. Get some cardboard and do some crazy breakdance moves.
House Fire, I expect you guys to be sliding barefoot on rocks. Or
House Wind, I expect you all to be levitating by the end of task 3, upside down.
And House Water, I expect you to be moist.
Oh.
Thank you.
That's gross.
Ian does not look like he agrees. Condensation? No?
Oh, and Ian Cunningham is actually who I got the paper pickup challenge from. So shout out, credit to him.
Ian, that's cool.
He's in my house too, by the way. Just wanted to throw that out there.
You're a lucky man.
Jonathan Mead asks, moist ... where ? I'm not going to justify that question with an answer, Jonathan. Let's just say crevices. A lot of crevices. Crevices.
Crevasses.
You said assignment 3 was ew, but that was definite major ew. Right.
Misha Bucker asks, when do we learn the pelvic shake? You cannot learn the pelvic shake. You cannot be taught the pelvic shake. The pelvic shake will come by its own. In task 2, does using a stretch reflex count as momentum? I would say that in task 2, in regards to momentum, the easiest way of thinking about momentum and trying to avoid a momentum is that if you imagine that you can stop at any point throughout the movement, that is without momentum. So if you did the movement and I told you stop at any given time, you should be able to stop. All right.
Okay, I think that's it. Everyone should get to work. The webinar will be saved and uploaded both to the group and to YouTube as well for future review. It may be taken down later though to save bandwidth and to make sure that you use the resources now. Please remember to ask questions at the next live session.
Yup. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining. This was a learning experience for me. It's my first time, but I thoroughly enjoyed having this discussion with you, even though all of you were muted. Chinese censorship, yay! Okay, have a good day or night or evening or afternoon, guys, and we'll talk very soon. Goodbye.
Good day.
Good day, good sir.